Today I'm going to show you how to knit these twisted headbands using a circular knitting machine. I'm using a 40 needle toy knitting machine, but you can use any knitting machine that has 40 needles. These are by far the #1 most requested knitted item from my family and friends. I'll link below to everything you see today, including the knitting tags, the knitting machine, and the yarn. The yarn I'm using today is Loops and Threads True Gray. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for daily knitting patterns and tutorials. The first step in making the twisted headband is to cast on using a contrasting scrap yarn. I'm going to start by looking for the white needle. I'm going to start by wrapping my contrasting color around the white needle, then I'm going to go behind and front, behind and front, behind and front, all the way around the row, and I'll see you at the end of the row. Once you get to the end of the row, bring your yarn through here and through the middle tension. In terms of sizing, for most of my headbands, I do between 90 to 95 rows. It also depends a bit on your yarn's tension. So I would suggest starting out with 90, see how it fits, and then if you feel like it's a little bit too tight, move up to 95 and play around with it because it's going to depend a lot on your tension and your yarn. So I'm going to knit 5 rows of the scrap yarn, and then we're going to switch to the main color. I just got to the 5th row of my scrap yarn. I'm going to cut it and throw the tail into the middle to the right of the white needle. My machine doesn't have a counter on it, so I'm going to be using a hand counter today, and I'll link below to the one that I picked up. And now I'm going to switch to my main color, which is the gray. I am going to put in a decent amount of tail just to be on the safe side. I'm going to put it in here, put it in the middle tensioner, and you want your 2 tails directly next to each other as you begin to knit your row. You want to make sure, especially the first couple of rows are going in. So I'm going to knit for 95 rows, and I'll see you at the end where I'm going to show you how to seam up our headband. Another helpful hint is that I use a little bit of Sharpie to mark the pink part where the white needle is, because sometimes you can't see it when it's going around, and it's helpful to check how far you are from the needle. Go in and I pull up the work inside the knitting machine, and then we're going to continue on to 95 rows. Okay, now that we've reached 95 rows, we're going to cut a decently long tail. I usually cut, 1 to 2 feet just to be on the safe side. So just like we did in the beginning when we switched to the main color, we're going to put our tail in the middle, put our new yarn through the tensioner. We're going to hold these 2 yarns tight, close, and low as we begin our next round. We're going to knit 5 rounds in the scrap yarn color. Now that we finished our 5th round, we're just going to cut the yarn, throw it in the middle, and then to remove it from the machine, all you have to do is just keep knitting for a few rows and it'll just fall off. Sometimes it gets a little stuck on the last one, and just pull it right off. So this is our completed body of the headband. Now we just need to assemble it. Stretch it out. Next thing we need to do is seam up the sides and sew up the headbands in the twist. The next step in the process is to seam up the ends of the tubes. Essentially, when you use a circular knitting machine, you're going to be knitting a tube. So the next thing we're going to do is seam up the sides of the tube. The crochet hook I'm using today is a 3.0 millimeter, but the size doesn't really matter. There's 1 row of your main color, followed by 1 row of the contrasting scrap yarn, and then the rest of the body of the work. The row that we're going to be seaming up is that top row, the one that's right above the single row of the scrap yarn. Fold up your work in such a way that there's a perpendicular loop followed by loops that are right on top of one another. We're going to start by going through that perpendicular loop and then going directly into the one above it and pulling it through. The next loop I'm going to go into is the bottom loop. And then going through the next top loop. And then again through the next bottom loop. Top loop, bottom loop. And you'll continue like that for the rest of the row. I'm going to continue on and I'll see you at the end of the row to finish up. So I just finished seaming the row. I have 1 stitch left in the needle, and I'm just going to grab the extra yarn and bring it through the loop, and that will be our final knot. So here we have our completed seam. We now need to get rid of the scrap yarn. There's usually one side where it comes off really easily and one side where it's a little bit more of a challenge. You can either pull it off in one string or you might need to use scissors to kind of cut it off. Here's our completed seam. Now we're just going to turn around the work and we're going to do it on the other side. We're going to start with the perpendicular loop all the way on the right, and then we're going to go through the upper loop and bring it through. The next step is to go through the bottom loop, then the top loop, then the next bottom loop, the next top loop, and the next bottom loop. Okay, we're at the final stitch. I'm going to pull this last piece of yarn through, and we are done seaming. We just need to remove the scrap yarn, and then we'll seam up the twist in the headband. Now we have two completed seamed edges, and we're going to twist them together and make the headband. At this point in the process, I like to check to make sure that my headband is around 19 inches long when it's stretched out. The next step of the process is to fold the headband in half and then put them together like this. You want them layered over in a little sandwich. Place the tail of the yarn on a darning needle, and then we're going to go through and sew up the seam together. When you're done with the seam, you're going to have two tails left over, so the last step is just to tie a knot and weave in the ends. When you're working with circular knitting, it's really easy to weave in the ends because all you have to do is hide them inside the tube. Once you've finished your seam, all you have to do is turn it inside out. My headband is complete. I'm just going to add a knitting tag and we'll be done. People are always asking me where I get my knitting tags, and the answer is Archer Knits on Etsy, and you can also find her on Instagram. So that's it, our headband is complete. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel so I can continue bringing you free knitting tutorials and content.